Since 2014, I've been living with my girlfriend and her parents in a somewhat old house, probably built in the 1950s. While I can't afford to live in my own house, I agreed to live with them to help pay bills and groceries. Plus, only paying $200 a month with no commitment or late fees is a great way for me to live below my means. My job and schoolwork are all done online, and I do not leave the house unless we're getting food. Her parents are nice enough to give us a room of our own, and never bother us unless we're having a cookout in the front yard. I always enjoyed having a few beers with them before settling down with some delicious barbecue. There aren't too many rules, except they're very strict on locking the doors when we leave the house. This can be a minor inconvenience since I do not have a key of my own, but I never questioned it. We do not exactly live on the nicest side of town, and anyone can otherwise just break right in. And her mother's side of the family aren't exactly the most stellar people. They would take any opportunity to steal what is inside the house. All the windows have bars on them to deter thieves, so the house is always carefully secured when anyone left. One day, my girlfriend's uncle was having a cookout, but I had way too much schoolwork to do. I am a perfectionist when it comes to my assignments, and will get upset if I make anything below a 95. My final assessment was due in a few hours, and I had thousands of words to write. I told her I would stay at home, and she and her family might return home late. I was home alone, but that didn't bother me at all. I stayed up all night finishing my paper and making sure I got everything on point. The paper was submitted, and I figured I would stay up a little later, goofing off and watching videos on YouTube. It was probably 2 a.m. at this time, and my eyes were growing heavy. I was still surprised they hadn't returned yet. When the lights get low in the house, even during the day, the hallway is as dark as a rabbit's hole, and I cannot see an inch in front of my face. I can only see the tiny glass window in the front of the door. I've walked around the house to know where the doors are at, and popped into the bathroom to brush my teeth. Silence is rare in this household, and although I didn't mind hearing the loud jukebox as our family played cards, it was nice to have a quiet night's rest for once. I closed the bedroom door and crawled into bed. I haven't been this cozy in weeks. A few minutes later, I thought I heard slow footsteps in the house. I opened one eye, scanned the room a bit, and figured it was just my imagination. The footsteps got closer, and I noticed the knob was slowly turning as the door creaked open. It sounded like someone or something was trying to enter my room. I lifted my head and said, "Hun?" Then the door slammed shut. The hairs on my spine stiffened and I grabbed my metal baseball bat. Thinking there was an intruder in the house, I was ready to smash their face in, but mostly terrified. I turned on all the lights and ran toward the front door, only to discover it was locked. I ran back to the darkened patio, and the door was also locked. I consider myself a man of rational thought. If there was indeed an intruder, they must have been extremely skilled to break and enter and make such a clean escape. But on second thought, I did not believe in ghosts. Never did. At least, I didn't want to believe that paranormal could actually happen. I kept the lights on and called them asking if they were coming back anytime soon. When they returned, I told them everything, and they said some similar instances happened to them in the past. Although I'm an atheist, I joined them in praying away the evil spirits. At this point, I had doubts about my own mind and wondered if I was going insane or if that really did happen. About 2 months later, my girlfriend and I were doing our usual evening routine. She would stay up all night playing World of Warcraft, while I browsed YouTube and watched weird and funny videos. This time everyone was in the house. Her brothers were in their room playing Xbox. Her sister was watching movies with their parents, and we were talking about nonsense. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Every time before bed we had the door closed. This time it was locked. Since there was no central air in the house, the rooms would get fairly hot. I was not always comfortable with this, but I got used to it eventually. Late into the evening, we were the last ones awake. Of course, we were both tired and fell asleep at relatively the same time. Suddenly, I awoke to the sound of my girlfriend making noises as if she was having a nightmare. I looked to my left and shouted, but she didn't wake up. The doorknob was shaking violently and I froze in place thinking to myself, "You have got to be fucking shitting me." I heard a click, and everything fell silent. My heart was pounding at this point, and I stared at the door the entire time. A few seconds later, the knob turned very slowly, and the door creaked open. Again, I was thinking, what in the unholy fuck is going on? I watched as the door slowly opened. This time it creaked all the way. The room was unusually cold, and I didn't dare to get out of bed. I heard the chairs slowly move in the kitchen and the slow footsteps again. I stayed up several hours just staring at the doorway until daybreak. That morning, I felt like shit due to the fact that I didn't sleep. I told this story to my friends, and one of them suggested that I check the history of the house. According to the owner, an old baker woman lived there over 40 years ago. That would explain why there was an unused brick oven in one of the corners of the kitchen. Apparently, she was stabbed to death in her own home a few decades ago, and the room I occupy was hers. I never believed in ghosts, but those 2 nights were the scariest experiences I've ever dealt with, and I sure as hell believe in ghosts now. From now on, we leave the door partially open and pray that her spirit doesn't mean us any harm. My great-aunt's house has been standing for nearly 100 years now, having been built by my great-great-grandfather around 1925. And with such an age, one can definitely expect some weird things to be going on around it. The house isn't creepy looking at all. In fact, it's had quite a few renovations and looks just like any other house in the neighborhood. So it really isn't the kind of house that gives you the heebie-jeebies just from looking at it. It's once you get inside that things might get strange. You see, a few of my family members have died in that house. My great-grandfather, one of my great-aunts, and a few others. Most recently, the house's former owner, my great-grandmother, died in that house in August of 2016. As far as I know, none of them died in awful or gruesome ways, just health issues usually. But still, most of my family members strongly believe that that house is haunted by their spirits, for reasons no one really knows why. I am one such believer, all because of one terrifying night when I was small. Back in the wonderful 2000s, before everyone had a smartphone and Netflix boomed in popularity, I would often be babysat by my great-grandmother. My mother wasn't in the best situation at the time, due to having 3 young children, quitting college, and an ex-boyfriend who was, and still is, awful at paying child support. So naturally, my mother had to get things done whenever she could, which often meant leaving us kids in the care of family members. Fortunately, my great-grandmother, who we all called Mama Smyrna, was happy to take us on. I still remember the days I spent playing there with my sisters and cousins. We were always fooling around with Bratz dolls in littlest pet shops, putting our feet against the heater vents despite being told not to, and eating berries from the mulberry tree that grew in the backyard. It was good times, so it was no wonder I was so eager to spend the night there when I was given the chance. My mother was forever worn out by everyday activities and child roughhousing, so she deserved a break from us every now and then. Such a break came, and Mama Smyrna gave us permission to stay overnight, giving my mother some much-needed relaxation. On one such night, I was there with my sisters and one of my cousins. After us kids had eaten our dinner and played our little hearts out, Mama Smyrna ordered us to put away our toys and get to sleep. In that house, there are only 2 bedrooms, and one of them was a playroom full of toys back then, while the other was Mom's room. No children were allowed in Mom's room, and the playroom wasn't exactly the place for sleeping in, so the living room it was. My cousin was eager to take the couch, but not as eager to share it with any of us. Fortunately for her, neither me nor my sister cared that much, and we were fine with the hardwood floor, cushioned with some blankets, of course. Before I get to the next part, I need to give you an idea of the house's layout. When you first enter the front door, you are immediately in the kitchen. Turn left and you have the living room. Go forward, and you are in a hallway that has a cellar door to the left, the playroom ahead, and the pantry to the right. If you go left from the front door into the living room, you can go right into another small hallway. In this one, the attic stairway and adjacent bathroom are to the right, and Mom's room is to the left. From the living room, you can see right into the hallway that leads to my great-grandmother's room. But back then all you were likely able to see was a tattered old sheet gently moving back and forth. This sheet was the door to the attic, which didn't have a real door. Because of a draft up there, the sheet would billow out and block off view of the rest of the hallway. This attic was the one thing that ever disturbed me about the house. Its stairs were old and creaked if you put weight on it, and the attic itself had one light that could be turned on by pulling a string. And of course, that light was in the middle of the room. None of us kids were allowed in the attic without an adult, mainly due to fears that we'd break something or fall down the stairs. Of course, I never wanted to go up there for fear that a monster would grab me and eat me alive or something. Yeah, my imagination and paranoia were, and still are, wild. Here's 8-year-old me, snuggled up to my sister, when something causes me to wake up. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a sound or something, but I can't remember. What I do remember is waking up and immediately feeling afraid. Here's something you need to know about me. I have an intense fear of the dark. I always have, and even now at the age of 16, I'm still scared to sleep without a nightlight. As I looked around, I saw that the house was almost completely dark, save for the faint light of the moon coming through the thick, lacy curtains. My eyes traveled around the room and rested on the billowing sheet. Seeing that sheet, my mind conjured all sorts of creatures crawling down the stairs and only being separated from me by a flimsy old sheet and one of my sisters. I imagined how easily it would be to come over and kill me, and no one would be able to save me. At that point, I felt like crying, but couldn't take my eyes away from the curtain for fear of something appearing as soon as I looked away. Just then, a bigger whoosh of air comes from the attic, and the sheet billowed out further, before settling back. Then there she was. A pretty smiling woman was looking at me from in the hallway. She had dark hair and glasses, from what I could see. Oddly enough, I wasn't really scared. Maybe it was because she wasn't that awful skinny black creature I imagined. Or maybe it was because I was too shocked to be afraid. All I knew was that there was a woman in the house who I didn't know, and she was smiling at me. It seemed like forever, but was maybe only a minute or two of us staring at each other. Then she calmly said to me, "Relax." I blinked, and she was gone. I think it was because it was late, and I was exhausted from being so terrified earlier, but I suddenly felt a lot calmer, and a lot more tired. It felt like all of my worries were swept away by that one word, and I was able to sleep. Now about 8 years later, I think back to that time and I think I know who it was I saw. It was my great-aunt Tina. My family says she died due to health issues at a young age, around 30, and was in that house, in the corner of that living room. I was born long after she died, but my mother always speaks of her fondly. "You would have liked her," she once said. "She would take us kids out for candy and ice cream all the time, and she was one of the nicest people you'd ever meet." And out of all the supposed spirits in that house, Aunt Tina is the most attractive. My other family members have had experiences with her too. When my mother was younger, she lived in that house under Mom's care. She'd been told to turn off the radio to come and eat dinner, only for it to turn back on as soon as she got to the table, and it would always be on my Aunt Tina's favorite station. My cousin who was with me that night once saw the house phone fly off its receiver, saying it was because she'd asked Aunt Tina for a sign of her presence. Most notably, my Aunt Misty told me a story of how my Uncle William once saw Tina when he was about 4. Back then, the attic needed repairs because of the big hole in the floor, and no one was allowed up there for safety reasons. He was apparently sitting on the couch when my mom walked by. "Oh, she went upstairs," he'd said. My mom was confused and asked, "Who went upstairs?" "The pretty lady," Uncle William had replied. Naturally, my mom had panicked, thinking someone was upstairs, only to go up there and find no one. My family is convinced it was Tina who Uncle William had seen. Aunt Tina was always known for pulling pranks, according to my older relatives, so it's no surprise that she would be doing things like this for the sake of a joke. Once, she scared off some Jehovah's Witnesses by dressing in all black and going to the door and saying, "We worship the devil," before closing the door. My family is mostly made up of non-denominational Christians. My family has always seemed to have slight connections to the other side, as some people call it. Just before my great-grandmother died, my aunt claimed that she had a dream about having a baby. In my family, that either meant someone was pregnant, or more likely, that someone was about to die. Following her death, my great-aunt came to own the place, and I'm sure more paranormal experiences will come so long as that house is in our family. And it's not like anyone has any plans of getting rid of it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you have a scary story that you would like to submit, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. You can find that email address in the description. And if you would like to get early access to all of my content, as well as some other cool perks, go check out my Patreon page. It's a cool way for you guys to help support the channel as well as get some cool perks. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to watch this video. And remember to stay safe out there.